the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to the second SpotTrack.com podcast of 2019. My name is Paul Peck, with the founder and all things guru of SpotTrack.com, Mike Giannetti. Already we're into our second one of the new year, and it barely feels like a new year yet.
No, but there's plenty going on. Plenty
That's
to do.
true.
I'm plenty busy on the site, and the sports situation across all the leagues is really ramping up here in terms of some playoffs, some off seasons, and I guess for baseball maybe not so much. Right?
We'll talk about why it's again so quiet in baseball in a moment. Our normal third wheel here, Kevin Sylvester's on assignment, so he hopefully will join us again for next week. So Mike and I will carry you through this latest edition of the SpotTrack.com podcast. We're going to talk a little college football, a little NFL, a little Major League Baseball, and maybe even drop a little NBA in. As Mike said, there's always a lot going on this time of year, and to some degree, the off season of a football season is as, if not more exciting and interesting for Mike and for fans of SpotTrack.com than the season is itself. But Mike, let's start with a place that we don't normally start with, because at the moment, the players aren't getting paid, so it's not necessarily on your radar. But as we record this, the day after the national championship college football game and the big win for the Clemson Tigers, you want to talk a little bit about their quarterback.
I do, and by the way, the coaches are getting plenty paid.
That's true.
I mean, the bonuses
there are
from
no
last
caps
night.
there, are there? No.
Oof. So that's salt on the wound for those players. But yeah, look, it was glaringly obvious, and the discussions this morning and pretty much the rest of this week, I'm sure, are going to be about Trevor Lawrence, these quarterbacks that are playing in systems that now translate to the NFL. They do. I mean, you look at that game last night, that's an NFL caliber game. Clearly, those are the two best teams. That's not the discussion to have here. It's that we've got this 19-year-old kid who looks like he just got off a surfboard.
Yeah.
And he's ready.
I keep thinking of Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High for you older crowd out there whenever I see him.
The comparisons to celebrities and other people on Twitter have been
Sunshine
phenomenal.
from Remember the Titans, the dude from Dazed and Confused. That was last night, was trying to see
how many
different people they could compare.
My favorite was the comparison to Bad News Bears, the long-haired kid who came in at the end.
Yeah.
Rode the motorcycle. That's my favorite
one. You're Kelly Leak.
Kelly Leak.
There it is. Yes. So, when as you sent me the lineup for us to talk about, what you said to me was Trevor Lawrence, is he NFL ready? And the answer to that, on my perspective, is he's not NFL ready yet. Let's be honest. He's not. But as NFL offenses become more like college offenses, he becomes ready.
But aren't we there? We're not there?
Not there yet. No, not there. Because, again, you have to look at this most recent college class of rookie quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold and Mayfield and all those guys made an impact, but still didn't take any of their teams to the playoffs. So I'm hesitant to want to say that, A, we're there yet, and B, they're ready. But as offenses continue to look a lot more like they did, and let's be honest, from high school to college to the NFL, there's starting to be less and less of a gap. It makes a guy like Trevor Lawrence feel like he could step right in right now and be pretty good.
I'll agree with you. I'll agree that it's probably not likely that a 19-year-old comes to the NFL and is successful. I mean, Baker Mayfield was partially successful.
Sure.
Right? Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, they had their moments. I do think it's getting there more and more every year, right? I think we watched that game last night, and those are NFL plays and an NFL quarterback making NFL throws.
Yet how much time do we spend on this podcast talking about the 35 and older and the 40 and older quarterbacks and how they dominate the league? So I'm not ready yet to tell you that a 20-year-old kid can come in and do what Brady, Breeze, Rivers, and those guys have done yet either. But the difference is that a guy like Trevor Lawrence, who, by the way, is not eligible for the draft until 2021. He's got 2 more years at Clemson before he can come into the draft. But because he's been in clinics, in 7-on-7 camps, playing football nonstop, playing an offense that's pretty similar to the one he's playing now in Clemson, that leads itself to the progression of how guys can be ready quicker than they normally would be.
Here's why I want to bring this up. Here's why this matters to the Spot Track podcast. We've said it before. We had a pretty good discussion last week about it on here. I'm worried. I'm worried that if we've got 19-year-olds who can do that and potentially could do that in the NFL, right? It's arguable at least.
Sure.
It's arguable.
Sure.
And we've got Baker Mayfields and Josh Allen's and Josh Rosen's and Sam Darnold's, and there's another wave coming, and there's another wave after that. And Phillip Rivers is going to retire in 2 years, and Ben Roethlisberger in 2 years, and Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees and Eli Manning and Joe Flacco. And there's this massive transition happening, and that's just at one position, right? We're not even talking about running backs or cornerbacks or safeties.
But it's relating itself to wide receivers, and it's relating itself to the Chargers playing 7 defensive backs against the Ravens. Who would have ever thought you could do that? But they did it because of what the offenses are now dictating to the defenses.
Right, exactly. And I think we've already seen it with wide receivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Des Bryant barely had a job this year.
Yeah.
And he's 30, not even 30.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
So we're seeing
There's
the
so
trickle
many
down.
of them
You can
out
see
there.
where I'm getting to. There is not only is there a saturation, but there is a complete shift to the rookie wage scale.
Right.
That is the only way for these teams to build now, right? And if you're a lonely free agent, whether you've scored 10 touchdowns last year or not, you're getting $2 million or less.
Yeah.
And that's just where we're going. And that's terrifying. That's terrifying from a veteran standpoint. That's terrifying from a cap standpoint. Here's why I wanted to get into this. There are currently 12 teams with at least $40 million of cap space for next year. 12. That's almost half the league.
There's almost no way they can all spend that.
And there's 6 good free agents.
Yeah.
Let's be fair.
Yeah.
There's 6 good free agents. There's really not a great wide receiver out there.
Right.
There's
Golden Tate probably would be the number one
good,
guy,
not
right?
great at his age, right?
But not a number one dominant
No, he's not
receiver.
going to catch 100 balls. So
No.
where are we going with this, right? Where are we going? Has the NFL sort of come to its breaking point with their current CBA, which allows teams to roll over cap and has since 2011? I mean, you had teams who completely rebuilt themselves last year. The Cleveland Browns, the 49ers, the Cardinals to some degree, the Seahawks to a lot of degree, right?
Yeah.
They completely rebuilt themselves. Last year, they spent a ton last year, and they still have $60 million in cap space for
All right.
this
Well,
year.
you mentioned the rollover thing. Why is that? Why is it like that? How did that happen? And does that need to change?
Yeah, of course it does. It was done initially.
Again, teams, if they don't spend in 2018, whatever money is left can be rolled into 2019. So the number may tell you that you have $25 million under the cap, but if you didn't spend 20 the year before, now you have $45 million.
Right, and we show it as the total. We show it as the combined on Spot Track. So when you're seeing cap space for 2019, you're seeing a combination of, cap that's spent into 2019 versus cap that's been rolled over. So it's, like I said, these numbers are sort of jarring for a lot of these teams who just went and spent $100 million last year. It is a problem, I think. I think there's maybe too much space to work with now.
Well, it goes against a lot of what we talk about on this podcast, which is free agency is a fool's gold. It teams, there's just no correlation to long-term success by going out and spending a lot of money on veterans. And so here you have all these teams with all this money to spend, no really good players to spend it on, but desperation from some of these teams to show their fans that they're being active. So they're going to go on crazy wild shopping sprees.
You asked why it was put in. It was put in 2011 because teams were a mess. The Saints, the Cowboys, there were multiple teams who were just in cap hell, essentially, right? And to throw a hard cap into the league and say everybody get underneath it and everybody do it, they basically had to put in a rider, right? A guide to help these teams sort of understand how this was going to work. Give them a couple of years to flush it all out. Well, we're past that point. We're 8 years in now. This is going to be the 8th year of the CBA. And teams have figured it out. Not only have they figured it out and cleaned out their systems, but they've completely converted to this, this rookie wage, build through the draft, minimal veteran, benefits. The contracts they're going in 2 directions, right? Most of the positions are completely stripped down, and then you've got the quarterback, which has risen 80%. I did the numbers this morning from 2011 to 2019.
Wow. Yeah, the average
in 2011, Peyton Manning had an $18 million salary. That was the highest. Now you've got Rodgers at $33.5.
Right.
So exponential growth there, of course. But, the cap and the rookie wage scale has only grown 60%. So of course you're going to pick that. You're always going to pick that, and especially with the quarterback position, if you can get a guy for 6 years. So there's a couple of things to discuss here, and I want to get your take on it. Let's start actually with the rookie wage scale. I'm all for it. I'm all for a governed system for guys to come in and have. Look, if there's no complaints, there's no. You can barely question what you're going to make.
The Sam Bradford deals of the past were unfair, and it frankly pissed off the veterans.
Yep.
Because these guys hadn't done anything to earn it, and let's be honest, the culture of the NFL is all about you have to earn your place, you have to earn your spot. This is a man's league, all that stuff. So that was driven by the players as much as anything. That won't change. It won't.
You don't think?
No, I don't think so, because I don't think the players. I don't think the players are willing to the veteran players who still make up the bulk of the NFLPA.
Yeah.
I don't think would be willing to sacrifice the fact that they don't want to see untested players earning more money than they do.
Okay. The problem is it's such a good value. It's too good of a value. It's way too good of a value.
It's changed the way teams think now because the value is so good.
The Browns were going to sign Sam Bradford or Kirk Cousins because they could get Baker Mayfield for $33 million over 4 years, plus a 5th-year option, plus a franchise tag.
So the players are going to have to realize that what it's done now is shifted the paradigm to draft them, play them, dump them. So they're never even getting to that veteran point. Try
to trade them. If they can't trade them, they're gone.
Yeah.
So
it's a good
here's the second
counter
part
argument.
Of this. Here's the second part of this. So you're probably right. You're probably right. The wage scale is not going away, but does it need to be shortened? Why does it need to be 4 years? If guys have to stay 3 years in college, why do they need to be on a 4-year governed rookie contract?
My first thought would be teams feel like they need that long to develop the players.
But didn't we just prove they don't?
This is changing, though, right? As soon as I said it, I realized it. It was done in an era where a rookie made a minimal impact and a better impact in his second year, but really became the player that he was supposed to be in his third and fourth years, and the teams wanted to be able to have that player under control and not lose him. Could you imagine if the rookie deal was 2 years? 2 years, but to the point you're making is guys come in now so much more. Not all guys. We were talking about this before. Some positions lend themselves to being able to come in and play and impact right away. Others, like quarterback and wide receiver, don't always impact as quickly as other positions do. So teams are going to be hesitant to say, wait a minute, we're not going to put all this time and effort and use a first-round draft pick on a guy and try to develop him to the point when he gets to be the player that we expected him to be in year number 3. You're telling me we're going to lose him? Teams will never let that happen.
Let me put this past you. Right now, the way I just laid it out, and it's fair. I mean, it's what we've seen. You get a 4-year rookie contract. You get a 5th-year option for the first-rounders, which essentially most of these quarterbacks are. So 4 years, 5th-year option, 6-year franchise tag, maybe a 7th-year franchise tag. Those are all in play now. That is a significant window. We've talked about windows on here and cycles, across all the sports. That is a budgetable window.
Right.
If you get Baker Mayfield, you've now got him for 7 years, and you don't have to do anything about it. You just have to afford it, which you can.
Beyond quarterback, let's be honest, that is well past the average life cycle of an NFL player.
Well, if we're talking the other positions, definitely.
Yeah. Like
if we're talking about a wide receiver in the first round who gets the 5th-year option, that's plenty of time.
Right.
Certainly for a running back.
That's too much time.
So this rookie wage scale now is 7 years for these elite players, right? That's where we're talking.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Which is plenty of time for these teams to figure this out.
Which is why I always sort of bristle at fans who are like, oh, he's going to be our left tackle and our quarterback for the next 10 to 12 years. No, he's not. He's going to be there for 6 and maybe 7, and that's it.
But what if it was 2? What if it was 2? What if you only had 2 years? Does that increase or decrease the chance that you have to play the guy right away?
Well, it certainly increases.
It does.
Yeah.
But then what happens year 3?
Well,
what if that's a club option? Basketball does 2 club options.
It would even make the discussion table unless the club option was part of year 3.
Of course.
Because there's no way the teams are going to want to let guys go after 2 years.
The NBA has a 2-year contract, a 3rd-year club option, a 4th-year club option, then there's a 5th year essentially like a franchise tag, essentially.
That makes a little more sense to me.
I just think this thing needs to be reduced.
Yeah.
Because you're giving teams house money.
Right.
You're saying, here's our guy. We've got him for 6 years, maybe 7. There's no questions. Nobody's going to touch him. It's not going to cost us more than maybe a combined $60 million for Baker Mayfield.
Would a position-specific factor come into something like that?
I think it's going to have to be in the conversation.
Because the quarterback has to be treated differently.
Of course.
Has to be.
Of course.
Again, I'm trying, and all these are great ideas, but you have to think about how realistic they may or may not be. And I can, if this comes up at the bargaining table, the teams are going to be like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. We're not, a quarterback isn't ready. I mean, clearly, as we saw with the group that we mentioned, they're not likely to be the players that they're supposed to be until year 3. So there's no way.
I'm not sure there's evidence for that anymore.
Well,
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but they weren't the players they're supposed to be in year 1. So
Sure.
You would figure all of them will take incremental steps forward in year 2. So does that mean all 5 of those guys are going to the playoffs next year? I doubt that. But maybe by year 3, when Josh Allen and Rosen gets better pieces around him and Mayfield gets more comfortable, year 3 would be the year. I don't think that's changed when those guys will become who they're supposed to be.
Okay, that's fair.
So from an NFL team standpoint, you're like, what do you mean we're going to lose them after that?
Yeah, I think that's the point. I think the point it shouldn't be so easy. Right now, it's really easy.
True.
It's really easy to draft a guy, play him, 6 weeks into the first year, let him get his feet wet a little bit, let him be terrible in year 2. Doesn't that always happen? I mean, there's always a setback in year 2.
Usually.
And in year 3, they
yeah, well, and
Dak Prescott.
Because now Dak Prescott, we already saw it to some degree with Lamar Jackson when
Sure.
the Chargers came around the second time. Every team on Baltimore's schedule next year is going to devise a system to combat what Lamar Jackson does. Now, is he good enough to overcome that? Well, we'll see. Some guys have been, some guys have not. You brought up Dak Prescott, classic example.
Yeah. To me, that's just something that needs to be on the table at least some sort of revision work with the rookie wage scale, because I just think the process is a little bit too, like I said, it's a little bit too easy right now for teams. It's kind of a slam dunk. And there's no chance for the Joe Flaccos in the world to hang on anymore. I mean, Joe Flacco may never start a game again.
Right.
He may never start a game again.
Well, he will, because he'll go somewhere where someone gets hurt. But see, that's the other thing. The injury factor changes a lot of that. But I know what your point is that there's a chance that there's not a single team that's willing to commit to Joe Flacco to be their starter.
Yeah.
He better be ready to be a backup somewhere.
And look at a situation like Jameis Winston. There's probably no reason he should be back next year, but he's going to be.
He will be.
And you know why? Because the rookie wage scale allows for it. Oh, right. He's got a 5th-year option. It's easy. There's an end date. Right, there's an out after this.
We
might as well just do it for one more year.
One more
it's written
year,
into the CBA.
Yeah,
I mean, there's no other reason he should be on that team.
No, you're right.
Especially with the guys who are going to be available. So to me, it's like I said, it's sort of making things a little bit too easy for these GMs in terms of the young guys versus the old guys. But let's switch here. I want to switch gears to the old guys because the old guys, like I'm calling them 27-year-old old guy. But look, there's another systematic thing happening because of the cap space that's involved that we mentioned here. San Francisco got $60 million again. They had $109 last year. And because they had that, they gave Jimmy Garoppolo this ridiculous contract, right? The 6-year deal. It's not a 6-year deal. It's a 1-year deal.
Right.
I said this right when it happened. I'm going to say it right now. They gave Jimmy Garoppolo an NBA deal.
Yeah.
Okay? It's going to look like it's this awesome thing. It's not an awesome thing. It's 1 year's $37 million. From here out, he's a $23 million quarterback. $23 million a year. That's average. That's what Dak Prescott's going to be. Okay, which is fair. That's great.
For a starting quarterback with an upside in the NFL.
Great,
yeah.
Perfect. Especially with the injury now. Perfect. I'm sure they're thrilled about that. But are we going there?
I think so.
Are we going? Is that what this offseason is going to be? I'm going to pay Le'Veon Bell $20 million to be a Colt?
That's what I was just going to say to you. There's already been a lot of talk. If you've followed what the Colts have done and this terrific run that they're on, the 10 of their last 11 wins, and what do they have? 100 and some 120 in cap space next year. Now, how are they going to spend it? What are they going to spend it on? They're not the Redskins. They're not going to go out and sign a bunch of veterans. But maybe they do decide that Le'Veon Bell can help them next year. But I almost guarantee you, to your point, they'll offer him a 1-year, $25 million deal.
It'll look like 4 years.
Right, 50. But they can handle it under the cap because they've got all this ridiculous space they're never going to spend. There's no commitment to him beyond that. Right. The Jets, the Bills, the Colts
they
are
could
the
all
three.
Do it.
They all have this ridiculous amount of cap space without a big pool of available players to spend it on. So I think what you're going to see is exactly that. Okay, we'll sign you. We'll give you a ridiculous amount of money up front, but if it doesn't work out and you don't live up to what you're supposed to be, then we have the ability to get out of it. I think Le'Veon Bell better totally be ready to handle basically a 1-year, $20 million deal.
Is this good?
I don't know.
A lot of the other sports
good.
have had this happen, and they've had to change. Basketball had to go to basically weighted salaries, right? So you can increase or decrease 5% every year. They had to do this. Hockey doesn't even deal with it. Hockey, the cap hit is just the average salary of the contract.
Right.
And maybe that's somewhere football needs to go.
The players don't love it because there's no long-term guarantees,
but
right? So
no...
Le'Veon Bell is going to bristle at not being able to sign the 5-year deal that he thinks he deserves, right? So the players' dissatisfaction with it will drive changes, would be my suspicion.
So this is twofold, right? Garoppolo gets that deal because they don't trust him. Let's be fair.
They
don't trust him.
Proven himself.
He's got to prove it. That's a show-me deal. That's a modern show-me deal. Right? They had a ton of cap room. They needed to get to the cap floor. They had to spend money, and they had a ton of cap space to use. So it was a no-brainer to give him $37 million in 1 year. Obviously, that makes him happy too. But I think that is bad. I think that's bad for football. What if that $27 million AAV had to be the cap hit for all 6 years? What if that's how things
hockey.
ran? Yeah, hockey and basketball too. So I just think...
Well, then you're not doing it. You're flat out not doing it.
You're not doing it.
Right.
You're not doing it. And there's a lot of contracts that essentially do this, right? They're cap contracts.
Yeah.
Right? Whether they're short and cap up front, which is common. You see that a lot with extensions. Teams need to save some cap space, so they give a guy a 5-year extension and they push all the money to the end of the contract, and that never is going to happen anyway.
Right.
That's the common way to do it. But we're seeing the reverse now. The 49ers did this with Jerick McKinnon, too. They gave him a ton of money up front on a $7.5 million deal, which isn't $7.5 million, right? That's not how he's going to play out the rest of this contract. We're going to see more of this for sure. Bell's just one example. We're going to see, if Justin Houston gets released out of Kansas City, we're going to see the Bills and the Colts and the Jets throw a ton of money at Justin Houston over the first 2 years because they've got the cap to burn and they want to use that cap space while they have it because who knows in 3 years, right? So the two things correlate. You've got a push to build through the draft more so than ever. You've got your most important position being built through the draft, which is saving teams cap and cash everywhere right now. I mean, you've got the Browns being able to spend so much money on whoever, on inside linebackers and in defensive tackles. Yeah. They can do whatever they want right now. They can do whatever they want this offseason because they've already got a core in place. They've got the quarterback in place. They've got wide receivers in place. So it's complete house money in Cleveland right now, and they just need a coach who can put it all together. But,
it's a very interesting dynamic.
It's almost like
dynamic.
Both really ends of this need to be fixed, right? We need some sort of revision in the rookie wage scale I think to lessen the years. I think that would do it. I think that would make it more difficult to get that guy and then build your team around him and win a Super Bowl in 5 years, which is what these teams are trying to do. If you could minimize that window from a rookie wage scale point of view, I think that would at least make it more complicated, which is good. And then from the other end, I'm not sure these heavily front-loaded contracts are good for football either.
Well, the whole free agency dynamic for so many years was the teams that went crazy spending in free agency generally didn't see the benefits of it, and then were left caught with these ridiculous contracts that they had given veteran players who were never really worth it, and never lived to the value of it. But now what you're talking about is there's no repercussions there. You can do that, so why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you say, I need a wide receiver, I don't care who I need Golden Tate because I need a wide receiver, give him $20 million for 1 year, and if he's a bust and he never lives up to being a number one wide receiver, we can get rid of them. Where if in the past when you did that, you had to give Golden Tate $70 million over 4 years, and if he was a bust in year one, you're like, oh, we got this anchor hanging around our cap that and so now there's no repercussion. So now in a lot of ways you're even more crazy drunken sailor spending
for that first year, but
total.
So let me tell you. So the NBA has a very strong structure. They've really done their homework and they've really kind of cleaned this up since everything changed with LeBron and all that a couple of years back. This is the way I think the NFL needs to start to consider with those veteran contracts. Fine, pay Garoppolo $37 million, but then there's got to be some kind of structured template in place for the team to go from there, right? The contract can't go from 37 to 15 in year 2. It's got to go from 37 to 29 to, you know what I mean? There's got to be some sort of rhythm
70%
to the cash
from
flow.
1 year. Right. That's probably the way to do it, is there has to be a percentage limit from 1 year to the next.
That's how the NBA has it, 5% up or 5% down. So if you want to front load it, you can start high, but it's got to come down in increments of 5%. That makes a lot of sense.
Or there's a cap on the amount of upfront cash. That's kind of how the NHL does it, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you can give a guy $10 million bonus or whatever the limit on the bonus is, but you can't give him 80% of the deal in the first year.
I just think that is the discussion that needs to be had with this new CBA. Of course, the franchise tags need to change, things like that. I mean, the quarterback franchise tag is a joke. By the way, a little side note to this conversation, Jimmy Garoppolo's $37 million cap hit is throwing the franchise tag off.
Sure. That's
so you're going to have Le'Veon Bell at $22 million next year, maybe. That's going to throw the running back off. So you can't be doing that, because that's screwing everybody else up.
Yeah, that's another good point, is that all these front-loaded deals now raise the position, because the salary, the franchise tag, is based on position. So very interesting, and again, this all started with a conversation about how players are so much more ready when they come into the NFL because of the way colleges have changed, because of the way the NFL has had to change to adapt to what the college is sending them. It's always been the case. What the college is sending them is what the NFL has to be. You can, nobody runs the I formation with a fullback anymore, because there aren't any of those in college, and you don't have those kind of players anymore. So it's shortened up the time frame of when guys are ready to play, because they're so much more prepared. And again, to your point of, is it fair Trevor Lawrence has to wait 2 more years to get into the NFL? You could argue whether it is or it isn't. That the rules, you have to play 3 years in college. If they want to change the rule, that's fine. I always feel like there's overreaction to one player. There was overreaction to Leonard Fournette the 1 year, and as that proved to be, as it's turned out, he's never been the kind of player that people thought he was going to be. So let's cool our jets a little bit on that. Trevor Lawrence looked great. Again, give everybody in the ACC a year to figure out what Trevor Lawrence does well and what he doesn't do well, and see if the same thing happens again next year.
One last NFL note here, because it's topical. Why are teams still paying kickers? How are there 3 kickers with 4-year contracts right now?
I don't know. I mean, it's the nature of a kicker is that they're good, and then
it's revolving door, apart. Right? But it's revolving door. I mean, you see kicker changes. Some teams do it 3 times every year,
right?
And that's just how they operate.
Part of that is because there is a pretty good sized pool of available guys.
That's right.
Now, if you find a great one like a Justin Tucker, be happy, because they're so good. But if you get stuck with a Cody Parkey, who at one point was very good but clearly struggled all year, there's 10 other guys that can be just as good. Now, it's never easy to find a guy who could be a Justin Tucker, but you're right, and teams they've never had a lot of patience with kickers to begin with anyway.
Right.
But there's a lot less of it now, so you're right. Why would you ever pay a kicker big money?
Look at the Bears and the Steelers are both going to have to live with Cody Parker and Chris Boswell,
because they both gave him big contracts.
Yeah, I mean, unless the Steelers want to take some dead cap, which that's very possible, I guess. But Cody Parker's $3 million salary is guaranteed next year,
right?
To go with the bonus. So if you want to,
don't tell that to Chicago fans.
Oh, I did. I tweeted it right after the game.
Yeah.
And
now again, back to our original discussion, they can eat that if they want to, because I don't know how you bring him back.
They're going to have to.
They're going to have to. But
I love that Robbie Gould was in the stands drinking a beer.
Was he really?
Yeah, in the stands watching that.
Wow. Pretty much the all-time great Bears kicker. Yeah. Well, and that's what seems to happen to kickers is they just lose it. They just lose it. They'll be great, and they'll be the best kicker in the league, and in the next year they lose it. And or you get an injury or whatever, but it's the most mental of all positions, and there is no way for the best scout in the NFL to figure out when that guy's going to lose it.
But we live in this world right now where we're talking about teams with $90 million in cap space,
right?
And the only reason to sign a guy to a 4-year deal is to spread the cap out,
right?
To spread
Which you don't have to do anymore.
You don't need to do it anymore. Yeah. That's antiquated.
Yeah.
Put these guys on 2-year deals. Guarantee the first. Get out if you need to. I mean, that's just that's a no-brainer for me. I mean, in terms of cap, I'm all for guys getting paid. By the way, I'm not trying to I'm not trying to crap on any of that. But In this situation where it's been a revolving door for 5 years, I mean, the turnover has been unbelievable. It's something to actually look up at this point, how many kickers have been turned over and on their 8th team right now, you know? But, yeah, it's just you hate to see a story like this where a guy who, has that situation happen to him probably can't come back to that city anymore.
Probably not.
But it's going to get paid $3 million to walk away.
So our football discussion today started with a player from Clemson who can't play in the NFL for 2 years, and it ends on kickers. How about that, huh? All right, let's talk a little Major League Baseball, Mike.
Let's end on this.
Any update whatsoever? Every week we touch on baseball, and there hasn't been much going on.
I actually want to come full circle on this conversation, and I want to talk Bryce Harper to kind of close things out here. Really interesting stuff happening from Scott Boras. And if you're not following that, do some homework on what Boras is offering here. He's signed a couple of players now, Zach Britton with the Yankees, and then the Japanese player to Seattle, to these really unique deals. So we're already out of the player option era, by the way. That's old news now. Not only is there a player option, but there's a club option with it, right? So essentially it's a mutual option. But not only is it just a 1-year option, it's this whole second contract, right? It's like, here's a 3-year deal. If the club wants to, they can now extend it to a 4-year extension after that, already built in. The numbers are already there. There's no restructuring or any of that having to happen. So this guy can just be on the team for 7 years if the club wants it. Otherwise, they can decline it, and then the player gets the option to play out 1 more year with the team on X salary. Super, super good stuff. Basically, you're giving the team the ability to have this guy long term, which is what you want with a free agent who is going to be a major piece like a starting pitcher. Or you can get out of it, but then the player also gets some chance to make some money and stick around for another year if he wants to, based on where he sits in terms of his career. I love the direction that's going. With all that said, Bryce Harper, Scott Boras' major client here for the next probably 3 weeks, based on how this is sort of laying out. I have come down on my thoughts with him. Bryce Harper has a real chance here to do something that needs to be done, and it's right in line with all these discussions we're having across these sports. He has a chance to be Kevin Durant and LeBron James right now, and I think he needs to do it. I think he needs to take the stance of the 10-year $350 that everybody talked about. He talked about. Boras has talked about. It was $400 at one point. That contract is dead. And even if you get creative, like we just mentioned, like Boras has been trying to do here, even if you get creative, that's not sexy to anybody anymore. Nobody cares that Giancarlo Stanton has a $325 million. Nobody cares anymore.
No, it's not like when A-Rod
because he still strikes out every 6 times.
A-Rod signed the 10-year deal, and it was whoa. I mean,
no,
it's not like that anymore.
There's no headlines for that anymore.
Nope.
They last an hour, then they're gone because the next guy's up, right?
Yep.
And that's what's going to happen here.
And we're immune to the money now too.
Completely.
I mean, again,
sorry,
I can take you back to the older days when I'll never forget as a young kid when the Yankees signed Dave Winfield to the first ever $1 million contract. It was shocking. It was headline making. It was the front page of the newspaper. It was amazing. And again, that was a world where gasoline was 80 cents a gallon too. So those days, we're immune to the money.
Where would Bryce Harper's $350 million contract end up in a newspaper right now?
Other than in Washington, third page.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here's where he could make some noise, and it's the Durant situation, right? The difference between this and the NBA is the NBA has slotted maximums, right? So Kevin Durant or LeBron James could only sign for $38 million for the first year. That doesn't happen in baseball. There's no minimum, right? It's a luxury tax league. So if Bryce Harper comes out and says, I want $45 million this year, there's going to be teams raising their hand, right? I want a 1-year, $45 million contract, and then I want a player option of $50 million next year. To me, that's the way to go.
Interesting.
Here. Let's shorten this thing right down. And by the way, I think it should be back with Washington. I think the Nationals have done enough this offseason. That pitching rotation, they've added the relief pitchers. They've got the kids in the outfield. Maybe doing this doesn't allow them to extend Anthony Rendon this year. Maybe they have to wait till next year. Fine. Everybody's still there. This team was a playoff team, in the making. They just sort of lost their wheels in the middle of last season. That happens. I just think there's a comfort level with Bryce Harper and the Nationals. They're still in talks. They've been talking as recently as 2 days ago. This is where this needs to go. Don't hamstring the Nationals. You don't want to be there for 10 years, by the way.
Right.
No question.
You don't want to lock yourself in.
You don't want to be in D.C. for 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you're there for 1 year and you have a salary that is $20 million more than any other player in baseball, and you get the chance to make $50 million in 2020, right? If you get to increase yourself in 2020, what else would you want? $95 million in 2 years to be with a team you've already been with and have a legitimate chance to take that team to the finish line.
You know what? This whole discussion today, as we wrap things up here in the SpotTrack.com podcast, makes me think of two things. Players are commodities now, basically, and it makes me think of, and I just happened to watch it a couple weeks ago on Netflix, an old Jerry Seinfeld stand-up routine, and one of Seinfeld's famous bits we talked about sports fans, is that you're rooting for laundry, right? You're not rooting for players anymore. You're rooting for laundry. You're rooting for the uniform.
Yeah.
Whoever is in it this year, next year, they're different players are going to be in it, and that's probably a 20-year-old bit, but maybe Jerry knew where things were going in that, and that's what's disappointing for fans, because fans are emotionally attached to Bryce Harper, the player, not the outfielder for the Nationals, but. This is what every part of the discussion today has been about. Don't get locked into the player. Get locked into the team, because there's a good chance that every year it's going to be a different guy.
But, and we're here in Buffalo right now, Paul, right?
Right.
And we just had Kyle Williams, Buffalo Bills defensive tackle, retire. Solid player for 13 years. But he's important because he was here for 13 years.
Yes, but it's so rare now.
No, but that is his importance.
True.
I mean, he was a Pro Bowler a few times.
Right.
He made some nice big plays for us. One playoff game in 13 years. That's not his fault, but he is beloved here because he was here for 13 years, and there's something to that. And you put Bryce Harper back in that team for a year, maybe two more, and to me that conversation changes, right? Because then he's made a decision to stay.
I don't know that the players and the agents think that way anymore, though.
No, but you're talking about perception. Yeah. Perception should be team, not player. But if Bryce Harper makes a decision to return to Washington, even for one more year,
he's a hero.
He's a hero.
Yeah.
And isn't that part of what he's looking for right now? He's looking for that.
I don't know, Mike.
He's come out and said, I want my contract to be something people talk about.
Yeah, I don't know whether players think that way anymore. I don't, we live in a world where you can watch any game anytime, anywhere. You can hop on a plane and be anywhere, any place in 3 hours. I don't know that that's important anymore for the players and the agents in particular. Now, for some it is. The Kyle Williams reference you mentioned is important. I don't know that that's something that's front burner for players anymore. They want to get their money. They want to get in a situation that they feel allows them to succeed, which then lets them get more of their money. Mm-hmm. A lot of players could choose to take less and stay where they are for sentimental reasons, for lack of a better word.
Sure.
I don't feel like I see that a lot anymore. I really don't.
I would agree with you, except for I'm discussing a contract worth $95 million over 2 years.
Yeah, right.
So I don't know how much sentiment involved.
Yeah, no, you're and it would be nice to get us back to that point where guys do think that, okay, I can take that, I can go there for 110, or I can stay here for 95 and keep my legacy going and keep and be a bigger part of the community. That's all great. I think it's a little pie in the sky, to be honest.
The NBA has taken measures to get guys to stay. Right. You can stay for 5-year contracts. You can go for 4-year contracts. There's a maximum.
But they don't. The greatest player in all time is on his fourth team now.
They don't. But it has happened. There's been more of that than not.
Right.
The NFL with this cap space is going to turn into that. That's how these teams are going to spend money. They're going to sign their own guys because they need to spend some money, and they can front load the cap of it this year, right? I mean, that's how it's going to work. You're going to see guys being signed to contracts that they normally probably wouldn't have quicker because of this cap space. So it's sort of the way that all these leagues are going, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be here for 10 years, but maybe 2. And that's what I'm saying with Bryce Harper. Why not 2?
All right, so one of the best reasons to be a regular visitor of SpotTrack.com is exactly what Mike's talked about today. Is you can see all these numbers reported, but particularly when it comes to the NFL, what Mike does so well is give you the reality of it. It's not a 4-year, $30 million deal. It's really a 1-year, $12 million deal, and that's what SpotTrack.com is great about, and that's what any good sports fan really needs to know, and not just buy buy into whatever the agent sends to the media that then repeats it because it looks better. Can't recommend that particular reason for checking SpotTrack.com on a regular basis. And of course, we'll be here with the SpotTrack.com podcast as well, talking about the topics and issues that are front and center when it comes to the world of sports business. Make sure you rate us on all the iTunes and other available places to get this podcast. We're here every week. For Mike Giannetti, the founder of SpotTrack.com, my name is Paul Peck. Thanks for joining us on the SpotTrack.com podcast.